Yeah, I mean, I think that was really one of the facets of Steve's script right off the bat, was the idea that the fantasies in Walter's head related to parts of himself, who he could be or who he wanted to be, as opposed to being a different character, just elements of who Walter was under the surface that hadn't been realized. And obviously want to have fun with it and enjoy the idea of being able to be in different worlds, and for the comedy to come out of it. But for me, that idea of like understanding how each fantasy leads him to becoming who he is and ultimately being able to realize his full self, that was really important. The challenge with it, which we found, and I guess it was in the first time around, you talked about this, John, when they were making the first movie, is that when you have fantasies that stop the story, an audience naturally wants to see the story unfold. So it's very challenging to keep the momentum going and to have the fantasies play out. So originally, we had envisioned these much more elaborate fantasies that went on a lot longer. And as we developed the script and worked on the script, we realized that we had to keep on paring them down. And that process sort of continued through the editing of the movie and finding that balance of how you could keep the momentum of the story going, but also having enough of the fantasies in there to give you a sense of what was going on inside Walter and just have fun. But we spent a lot of time, Jeff, Mann, and I, and the whole team, envisioning all these crazy fantasies that we ended up having to cut both for budgetary reasons. There was originally there was a fantasy that happened on 6th Avenue when Walter and Cheryl was sitting by the fountain, where he had this Lawrence of Arabia fantasy where Ted and all of the guys who work for Ted come galloping up on horses looking like Anthony Quinn, and they crash Cheryl and they ride the horses down into the subway, and they go through the subway, they come out the other side, and they're in in the desert, and then they end up like doing they end up singing the end song from Grease, right?
Yeah.
I don't know why we cut that. But it was money, basically. But that, we just realized as we went along we had to keep on paring it down. And then the other thing we learned in working on the story was it was very important to focus on Cheryl and Walter and the connection that they had together, because there's very little time in the story to develop that relationship before Walter goes out into the world. And so it really became important to focus the fantasies on Walter and Cheryl, and Walter wanting to connect with Cheryl. And so we kept on working on that all the way through the process of making the movie.